So as the year goes by, and if someone is getting a bit out of shape, you can see they're not sending me their invoices. You can give them a quick call and say, listen, what's happened? And you might discover the business is about to fold, or maybe they've changed, or something has changed in their market, and that's stressing them out.
Hello and welcome to the Gross Profit Podcast. My name is James Kennedy. I'm the CEO and co-founder at procurementexpress.com. We take the hassle out of managing your SMB's spend without buying an ERP, but we're not here to talk about that today. Instead, for the first time ever, we have a repeat offender, repeat guest on the show, Eamon O'Sullivan from my hometown of Dublin. Eamon runs an accountancy firm on the south side of Dublin here. Last time we were talking about how Eamon can help you set up an Irish subsidiary if you're an international business, but a man of many talents is not the only interesting thing Eamon has to talk about. A number of years ago, he started to transform his own accountancy practice from a traditional model to what some people are calling is service as a subscription. So that's a SaaS, but a different type. I run a SaaS, which is a software as a service, which is software you rent monthly. But Eamon has managed to do this for his own traditional accountancy business. And we're going to talk today about what's the traditional model, why you wanted to do that, what was good, what was bad, and maybe if you run a professional firm, could be maybe a lawyer, could be a fractional CFO, could be any sort of service business. We're going to talk about how you can turn your service business into a subscription business and why you might want to. So, Eamon, you're very welcome back to the show. I forgot to prep you on this, but maybe you could just introduce yourself by telling us something about you that not many people know.
All right. I guess so much of it is possibly out there at some point on the internet, as we all are at this stage between LinkedIn and our website. From Limerick originally, graduated in business in Galway, and now working in Dublin, probably like in common with most parts of the world. People gravitate to the big cities. I've lived in Blackrock most of that time. And so I've run a traditional kind of practice for a long number of years. It's good, it's exciting. You're in kind of crisis mode a lot of the time. You have the seasons of the year. You have the ebb and flow of people show up with a week's work and you've got one day to do it. And then you maybe have to go back and try and put your life back together, maybe put the accounts back together and hope that it all works out. And it is a bit of, it's not quite like running a newspaper, but there's a lot of ebb and flow. And as I said, there's a massive variety of work when you have your own professional services business, because you don't know what's going to come in. So,
well, let's hit on that as well. Maybe you could tell us a bit about the type of customers you have. I know you do the accounts for my wife, for example. She's a sole trader here in Ireland. What's your typical guy coming in off the street to you?
So, they're almost all SMEs. They all have the small to medium-sized enterprises. They're owner-managed. Probably 80% of them are corporate now at this stage. You have quite a good flow of people that would start off as a one-man band, a sole trader. They don't have the corporate structure. And maybe 50% of them convert to a corporate structure then over the year, as things go along and as the income goes up. So we can facilitate that kind of stuff. So they're about the kind of changes that we did. They were probably about 90% based in Dublin in terms of geographic spread, and probably 10% outside of Dublin, but within Ireland. And now probably about 25% of our customers are international. In other words, they're not based in Ireland. They have a company here. They have a business here of some sort, mainly limited companies. And in a lot of cases, maybe 10 to 15% of customers, I've actually never met them because they haven't, they might have been in Ireland at some stage. A lot of people that were here had limited companies and they moved back to the UK, back to France, back to Germany, whatever, or they had other connections to the country. And some Irish people that had limited companies here and subsequently moved abroad. So, yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a bit about running a services business. So my old man is a lawyer, which I guess is the closest thing I'd be familiar with, and he breaks his back. He gets paid well.
Sure.
But it's, there's a lot of, what's it like to run a services business like that for which is basically the majority, the backbone of the economy, let's call it, real
Absolutely,
businesses,
yeah.
people from taxis to shops to pubs, I guess, real, not to be too stereotypical about it.
Sure.
What's the good and the bad about a traditional model where they come in on 2 weeks before tax deadline with a shoebox and a problem, and you can charge them $5,000, let's say, to do the work?
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. So first of all, I mean, in common with most businesses that don't have any kind of massive USP, you're a service, you're there, you're geographically close to somebody, but there's always competition in terms of price and service. So you need to keep sharp. For example, with your traditional lawyer, I mean, a massive point of difference is people that turn the service around quickly. Maybe a transfer of a house or review of a contract or a lease. If you can get your lawyer to do that more or less overnight, you send him the contract today, and he or she has a turn back to you by this time tomorrow. That's a massive service point, and of course, it means they earn that $5,000 a lot quicker. But I mean, it comes at a personal cost, because you've just got to it's really a swap for straight swap, time for money. The guy that's sweeping the street is doing a straight swap for money as well. It's just that he's paid a lot less for his hour than, posh financial lawyer who's, working on, aircraft leasing or whatever you want. But it's still a straight swap, time for money. There's no leverage there in the strict sense, when you just look at it. So yeah, you can work a lot of systems, and we spoke just briefly beforehand. I think so many people fall into this kind of what I'd call like a kind of rom-com trap, that one big breakthrough is going to change their lives, and they're constantly looking for that big breakthrough. But in fact, if you can make a kind of percentage changes, small changes add up over the long run, where it's nip and tuck, you're making your changes as you go along. So one of the things we would have done, we tried to schedule people's accounts over the year, in common with most accountants. You try to get people to come in. And, if you remember, when your mother is trying to convince you to eat broccoli and you don't really want to eat it, if she'll stress the benefits, if you want to play football for Ireland, you got to eat your broccoli, and then you eat your broccoli. So if you stress to clients, well, look, if we have the accounts done early, you can plan what your tax bills are, or you can plan, there are certain deadlines that you can put a salary through. It's 30th of June for a 31st of December year end. So, you can, and they're genuine benefits. You're not lying. So you can try and plan your year. And there was a time, I would just have the year planned in just big splodges and say, well, there's a week. I put a week aside to do so-and-so as accounts. So you can, yeah.
So there's a feast or famine is what I'm hearing there. It's, still you can try and schedule it, but obviously people don't do things until the pin is on the collar, whatever the expression is.
No, it can be. And once you've done the accounts, then you're a kind of a problem. Do you know the way, like before the service has been delivered, you're someone that a customer needs to speak to. After it, then it's kind of, well, okay, now we've got a bit of a tidy up. We're having to answer questions. So like the tone of the thing changes a little bit. But listen, most people are decent enough to deal with, but you need to kind of plan that.
And then of course you need to get paid after the fact. So
yeah, you need to get paid then after the fact. So
I want to ask you about, because that you were doing this in a sort of more or less traditional mold up till about 10 years ago, I think, when we started talking about this first. Yeah. And then you noticed someone in the UK who had done something different, right? Maybe you could just tell us a bit about that.
Sure. So the person who looked after the IT for us, he did the website. And so I was redesigning the website, and he said to me, there's no buy now button, there's no BUY button. Where's the buy now button? Where can I sign up? And I kind of said, well, we're too classy for that. We're very posh. We're very upmarket, the type of people we deal with. And talk about delusional. So Robert, the IT chap, said, yeah, well, look, there's guys in the UK, they're traditional accountants like yourself, but they have that buy now button. They built up their website. So I had a look and said, look, it looks quite decent website, all right, but, that might succeed in the UK. I'm not sure, but, Anyway, so Robert came back at me and said, well, what would you say if you knew that this guy was in business for 2 or 3 years shorter than you, and he'd sold his business for 12 million, and he started from zero, the same as you? I was like, okay, so now the wheels are turning in my head. I'm thinking, yeah, right, okay, suddenly now I'm interested. So I had a look at his offering, and his offering was really a monthly fee. You just paid by the month. And so we just changed to go in that direction. Now, we don't exclusively work for by the month customers, and we don't exclusively work fixed fee. A lot of it, when it comes in, a lot of it is fixed fee. And I would have to say a lot of the annual accounts that we've picked up in the last probably 5 years have been by accident. In other words, we're everything that we promote is really, we only promote the monthly service. But some people come on and say, listen, I don't need the monthly thing. I have my own accountant. I have my own bookkeeper, or I do the books. And I just need you to do the year-end accounts for the company's office. So
let me double click there. Go back to the guy who sold for 12 million. How much, like, was he doing 12 million a year? What was his, like, what was so big about 12 million? Maybe he had 40 people or 50 people working for him.
He had 40 or 50 people working for him at that stage, yeah. But I mean, the traditional accounting practice would sell for 1 year's fees, give or take. You could get 80 cents on the euro, or you could get 120 cents on the euro. And that's typically spread over 3 payments. But I think he was probably on a multiple of maybe 4 or 5 times annual fees when he sold.
Okay, so this is unheard of for a service business to be able to, this is traditional allure of a software business. You get to a multiple of revenue versus a multiple of profit or whatever. Yeah. But this guy had managed to basically get software valuations for a service business.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Then he had your attention. Now he's like, okay, well,
let's crack on with it now. So the first thing I did naturally was, why reinvent the wheel? I then went and looked at this company's website, which is quite big. It had a lot of information on there, and I could see, and I went to the trouble of buying. He's published a book about 15 years ago. It wasn't in the Nobel Prize list. It didn't win the Booker Prize. It was a bit of his life story, but there are some nuggets in there, that he just, I guess, like any marketing, you just keep trying until something works just in your market. And, you can instance little keepsakes that you get from companies, pens, mouse pads, highlighters, whatever. So he found a method that produced leads for his business. And, listen, the other thing is so the crucial difference to me was, number one, the marketing, and then number two, the offering. So the offering was on a monthly. So that meant he didn't have, number one, you were getting a flow of work during the year. Number two, you were getting paid during the year. And so you didn't turn into a problem once the accounts were done, because you were a solution every month or whenever the payroll and VAT. So I guess, like, the traditional model was, you got annual accounts from your customers. You hired trainees, in other words, graduates that wanted to become qualified accountants. And they then worked on the kind of artistry of putting accounts together, knowing what to look for, saying, well, look, that doesn't look right. Motor expenses are too high. Advertising is too low. You've only got 6 electricity bills. You should have 12. That kind of stuff that, like the big consulting firms, they just hired the smartest people out of college, whether they did zoology, archaeology, or business, and they hire them. So, no, I didn't get any people like that. I didn't get any, boffins, but you could get solid business studies graduates that wanted to train as accountants. That's where we're motoring along. And so then I changed the model. So
you changed the model. So at the start, then I guess it's a little bit like now with the LLMs, these AI machines. Yeah. Suddenly, now that people realize it's possible, there's loads of them popping up. There's DeepSeek and there's all sorts of models. And I guess the more traditional analogy there is the 4-minute mile. Once the 4-minute mile was broken, suddenly people were breaking it all over the place because they knew it was possible. So you saw it was possible to be able to build a business this way. But how long? And the thing that I found in a subscription business is it just takes an awful long time to get going. So, like, you needed your base, your existing traditional business to keep the lights on, I'm guessing. And then give us a sense of how long it's taken to transform your business to where you started to today. So I feel like you've been making this transition for about 5 years. Am I right?
A bit longer than that, yeah. Well, there was a big jump forward at the time. Once COVID occurred. We had headcount then was 4 people plus me. One was remote, and that was really just by accident. I asked one of the people here, listen, do you know someone that would be good? And they said, yeah, I have a friend. She's just moved back home, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, listen, we'll take her on. And then it went 100% remote. So that was a big kick to move everything. We probably had about a quarter of our systems completely online and in the cloud. Then, so like but I would say probably about 7 years realistically, about 7 years, but like it's not a kind of thing that I really thought about at the time. If you'd said to me it's going to take 7 years, I would have said, well, let's not bother. But it wasn't a case of I wasn't making a living from it all through that, but it did change. So I kind of before kind of pre, I would have had SMEs, 95% Dublin. Referrals accounted for about 60%. In other words, existing customers say, hey, you need a better accountant than the guy that you have, or you've just started a business or whatever. Here's a guy that I've used and he'll look after you. And about 40% of it would be personal connections. So your neighbor, your cousin, your guy that you knew from a networking group, whatever. So that would be, I would count that as personal connections. We did annual accounts, including tax returns, and that was about 80% of our business, and about 20% of it was bookkeeping type or admin type of work. We had the trainees, and most of the interactions were face to face with, kind of meetings. You met people face to face. They came in, they dumped their box of books. But I mean, the kind of stereotypical shoebox, that doesn't really happen anymore. People come in with they have their spreadsheets done. They have, most 99% of people are organized because they need to know that, but anyway, so now we're still SMEs focused. In other words, the customers are mainly small to medium sized enterprises. About 25% of them are outside of Ireland. I would think referrals are about 10%, but mainly leads coming through advertising and marketing. That's another game changer to me.
And what's the split then in terms of people who are paying you monthly versus on the old model, roughly in percentage terms?
Well, up maybe 5 years ago, it was a third were paying me monthly because I had got some of the annual accounts people. They were the first to go into the monthly model. So I went to them and said, listen, we're doing this, we're doing that. I would have given them, I was providing a monthly service, but I didn't make them pay monthly, or I kind of sporadically send them a bill. There was no real kind of pattern to it, but they were the first probably 10 to 15 customers where I said, listen, we're doing this monthly anyway. So why don't I just bill you for this amount and spread it out over the year? So you kind of, again, like the broccoli, you stress the benefits to them, the cash flow. There's no big bill at the end and it's predictable. So then it would have gradually, everyone new that comes on board, what they look at first is the monthly thing, the service as a subscription. That's mainly where they're funneled to. So people accidentally can become about 20% of the customers now are annual accounts, but they came in, all the marketing, all the promotion is towards the monthly. But they'll still come in and say, well, listen, I don't need that monthly bit, and I'm not registered for VAT, or I'm not this, I'm not that, or my company doesn't do a lot of business. There's not actually a lot of transactions. We can do it once a year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. So 80% now is on a subscription basis, which I guess, what's the benefit to you as a business owner? Is it, I guess the cash flow is not, it evens out your cash flow in the year? And
like you're just, I would kind of illustrate it by a story, when like your first thing in the morning, you get up, not everyone, lots of people pick up their phone, they check, did I get WhatsApps from anyone overnight? Did I get emails, whatever? And I would check the bank balance, and some mornings it's gone up. Okay. 1 in 10 mornings, some big bill has gone through, the payroll has gone through, or the payroll taxes have gone through, and you go, oh crap. But mainly it's, some money comes in most days. So normally you're into this cycle, like not quite feast or famine, but you get a big rush when the tax returns have to be filed. Then you've invoiced out all your work, and then you've got to start chasing people and try and keep the money flowing. And, it's a cycle, but it's not very conducive to a low stress life. The money coming in every month is way less stressful. Also, you're kind of on top of things a lot more. So as the year goes by, and if someone is getting a bit out of shape, you can see, well, they're not sending me their invoices. Things have gone a bit out of shape. You can give them a quick call and say, listen, what's happened? And you might discover the business is about to fold, or maybe they've changed, or something has changed in their market, and that's kind of stressing them out. So sometimes you can find, so from the cash flow point of view, it's a lot easier to manage. It's a lot easier to promote a monthly service for some, lots of people are doing the annual accounts. That's my perception of it.
Now that you've said it, it reminds me a bit, I don't know if this is true or not, but I seem to remember in Chinese medicine, you paid a doctor to keep you healthy, and you only, when you're sick, he comes and fisks you. You pay him all the time, and then it's only when you get sick that he has to do any work, which now that you're saying it, reminds me a bit about this. So you only have to do work when they get sick, which aligns things better.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Now, you have to do some work every month. Yeah. And so I guess in terms of, we've basically flipped it around now. So about 80% is monthly at this stage, about 80% of the business. You're right. And certainly by number, it's definitely 80%. The whys, like I kind of drifted into the annual accounts thing because that's what I worked in when I trained. But now I'm kind of working by design. I've designed this rather than just drifting into it. So now, obviously, 80% of staff are working from home, whereas before they were all in the office. And probably 90% of the communication is by email.
So we'll finish up here with a sort of a tactical question rather. Okay. So this is about billing. So I guess the billing was much easier when you only had to send out one bill a year and you had your accounts receivable. Yeah. And that was it. Yeah. What steps do you need to tactically set it up so you actually get paid? Because, direct debits fail or people go out of business or whatever, it's not as straightforward. You have a lot more invoices to send out, I guess.
You do. Yeah. 100%. Okay, so we use a system that handles recurring billing, and you do have to get you have to get your customers to sign up. We don't have direct debits, something that we played with. They're not very popular with customers. Maybe it's just we don't push people into them. But I mean, there are other technologies where you can sign people up to just get variable payments. So that can be a bit of a hack, but some people, it's a bit of a job to do that. But compared to the stress of kind of, you don't want to be very aggressive in chasing bills, but you have to be assertive as well and chase bills. So it can be, when you were in the annual accounts arena, and that would they would be still the slowest payers for us. The annual accounts, and definitely the cycle would be the longest for annual accounts, definitely. But I mean, you need to align a lot of your tactical stuff. I recommend if you're going to make a change away from whatever traditional model is, ideally you'd find someone that has a tactics playbook in your area. So, I mean, in every market, in a lot of markets, there are people out there that have the tactics, not just the strategies. Because I mean, everyone can read Stephen Covey, with all respect to it, and that's kind of internalized now. I mean, 80 years ago, it would have been Dale Carnegie. Genuinely, so many people that had done Dale Carnegie they were now training me. They employed me and trained me, but they had been sent to Dale Carnegie or whatever, the public speaking courses. So that's become internalized now. But like Stephen Covey, again, with all respects, you get a broad framework, but you come in on a Monday morning and think, well, what's the tactical stuff I should be doing now? Like, what's the wording on the email to induce somebody to eat the broccoli? That's not going to be in Stephen Covey's book for my market. So if you can listen, or if you not listen, if you can learn tactical stuff from people that you also need to, ideally someone that has done what you're trying to do.
I guess on the billing part, Go Cardless is the technology I've heard in the UK, and that'll allow you to manage a lot of those subscriptions, and people can pay by card or they can pay by bank debit. Is it mandate? I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, anyway, you can get a direct debit mandate, but Go Cardless is the one that I'm hearing a bit about now. So that's possibly the next step, just to automate things a bit more, because as things have grown. But, going back to your growth, okay, if you have a very small base, this isn't going to be much good to you, but like 20% growth, which is what we've had for the last 5 years. Apart from 1 year, the first year of COVID was flat, but we've been more or less 20% growth for a long number of years now. And so unless you have a tiny base, 20%, that to me is a good rate of growth.
Yeah.
Do you know the way you're kind of, but if you have a very small base to begin with, that's a tough, like 20% isn't going to help you. You need to explode out of the blocks at the start.
Very good. All right, Eamon. So how can people get in touch with you if they need their accountancy work done? I don't know if people who are in the same boat you were doing annual accounts, I don't know if you're open to talking to those people too, but how can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So we have the website is the main conduit, really. You can actually log on there. Just going back to kind of the 1% things you can do, we have a system you can set an appointment yourself. You can kind of log in and see what slots are available. So the website is osamcquillan.ie. So it's O for Oscar, S for Sugar, A for Alpha, McQuillan, which is surname, .ie. And there's a few ways to contact us there.
All right. Well, fair enough. We have some American listeners here, so they will have no idea how to spell McQuillan. So I'll just say OSAMCQUILLEN. Have I got the A-N? I've got it right. Got it wrong myself.
Yeah. No problem.
Yeah. All right. We'll link it up in the show notes.
It's a .ie. It's .ie as well.
.ie. Okay.
So,
right.
Yeah. But
well, totally.
Yeah. No, I'd be very happy to talk to anyone that wants, a bit of a handout. It's a tough market, I think, because it's so competitive. I think that's probably similar with a lot of professionals. Whatever market you're in can be quite competitive, and you get no training if you start in a professional firm, you're the technician. The job appears from behind a black curtain. You come in, the job comes in on the bench, you do your stuff, and then the job disappears. So you don't have to acquire customers, you don't have to hire staff, you don't have to rent premises, you don't have to do your website, none of that. It just appears for you. So all the other stuff is done.
The irony, I'm sure you're a trusted business advisor for many of your clients, and yet in your own business, the cobbler's shoes, you've had to learn all this stuff without any help at all.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, yeah. But particularly the tactical stuff. You can do the high level, like I said, the Stephen Covey stuff, but to get down to the tactics, that's where I think that's a lot of people miss that part, that they were just never taught the tactics. But that's just my own perspective on it, yeah. All
right, thanks, Eamon, and thank you for listening. Your special reward for coming this far into the show is to be able to go to procurementexpress.com/mastermind. So we had one last night. They're turning out to be a real success. Last night we had about 30 fractional CFOs. We brought them together into an online meeting, and then we break them out into groups of 4 or 5. Each brought a business challenge that they were working on. And then they got a chance to get feedback from their peers on that business challenge. So it could have been something to do with, for example, last night there was one guy dealing with an owner's auditor, wanted to get some advice on how to manage that. Another person wanted to know how to grow their business more. Another person had a client who had a service business that had a profitability problem. So we brainstormed all those issues together. You get feedback from your peers, and it's actually been a bit of a hit. So procurementexpress.com/mastermind. If you are a fractional CFO, you want to get some peer advice from other professionals doing the same job you are, I'd recommend coming along. And thanks very much, Eamon. That was a good one.
Great. Thanks very much, James.